I was never one to believe in ghosts or paranormal nonsense. But something has been happening lately that I can't explain. It all started about a week ago when Lisa went out of town for a few days. She had this little trip planned with her friends, and I was supposed to have the house to myself. It didn't seem like a big deal at first. The quiet, the solitude, nothing I hadn't experienced before. But soon, I began noticing things. Strange things. Small things that I couldn't quite ignore. It started with the noises. At night, when I was sitting at my computer in the dark, the clicking of the keys or the hum of the screen would be interrupted by what sounded like footsteps. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. After all, I hadn't been sleeping well. But it kept happening. Footsteps pacing down the hall. The floorboards creaking under someone's weight. I'd get up to check, but every time, the house was empty. Nothing. The silence felt oppressive. I'd tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks. After all, Lisa had been gone for a few days, and I was probably just getting too used to the quiet. But then, one morning, after Lisa returned, I found something that shook me to my core. It was a torn photo, shoved in the bottom of her bag. A photo of her, with another man. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then I looked at her face. She looked different in that photo. Not just in a younger version of her way, but in a way that unsettled me. Her smile wasn't right, and her eyes looked like she was trying to escape. The man beside her was unfamiliar. I didn't recognize him, but there was something about the way they were standing together. Something that made my stomach turn. When I asked her about it, Lisa's response was quick and dismissive. "It's nothing. Just an old photo from before we met. Don't worry about it." But I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of something I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just the photo. There was something else going on with her. Her voice cracked when she said, "Don't worry," and the way she looked at me made my blood run cold. But I couldn't put my finger on it. I had to know more. Lisa had always been an open book. At least that's how I had thought of her. We had been married for 7 years, and I always thought our relationship was solid. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That photo? It felt like a warning, like a piece of a puzzle that didn't fit. Something about it made me feel like I had just unlocked a door that I wasn't supposed to see through. A door into a reality where I didn't know Lisa at all. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was reading too much into something trivial. But the more I thought about it, the more I started noticing things that didn't make sense. Lisa's behavior had become erratic. She started spending more and more time away from home, coming back late, sometimes not even explaining where she had been. When I asked, she'd just give me short, curt responses, brushing me off. "It's none of your business," she'd say. That response stung more than it should have. One evening, I had had enough. I decided I needed to know what was really going on. I took some vacation time from work and started keeping an eye on her. I followed her one day, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched her slip into a cafe with a man I had never seen before. They greeted each other with a familiarity that made my stomach churn. They sat together, talking quietly. Too quietly. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see their hands, Lisa's hand resting on his. It didn't look like a casual conversation between friends. There was something more to it. Something closer. Something that made me want to shout, to run over there and drag her away from him. But I stayed where I was, frozen, watching them. Trevor. That was his name. Trevor, the man in the cafe. Lisa had mentioned him before, said they used to be friends, but hadn't spoken in years. That didn't make sense. The way they looked at each other, the way they touched, it felt like there was more to their relationship than Lisa had ever told me. As they stood up to leave, Trevor squeezed her hand. I saw the look on Lisa's face. She wasn't pulling away. She wasn't trying to hide anything. She just stood there, like she was waiting for something. I watched them walk away together, disappearing into the crowd, and I was left in the dark. Was this what was happening? Was I being lied to? What had I missed all this time? I walked back to my car, my head spinning. How could I have been so blind? As I sat there in my car, I knew I couldn't just let it go. I had to find out what was really going on. But nothing could have prepared me for what I would discover next. The next few days were a blur of confusion and suspicion. I couldn't shake the image of Lisa and Trevor together from my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her hand in his, the closeness between them. It gnawed at me, and every interaction I had with Lisa felt off. She was distant, distracted, and when she came home at night, she seemed like a stranger. I tried to bring it up, casually at first. "How's Trevor doing?" I asked one evening, trying to sound nonchalant, but her response was clipped. "I told you, Andrew, he's just an old friend. Nothing more. But her eyes were telling a different story. They were filled with a mixture of guilt and fear, a look that sent a chill down my spine. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I actually knew about Lisa's past. How many secrets had she kept from me all these years? I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something, and I wasn't going to let it go. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't just let Trevor disappear into the background like some minor detail. No, I needed to understand what was really going on. I needed to know why she was so involved with him and why she seemed to be pulling away from me. So, I did what any paranoid, frustrated husband might do. I hired a private detective. I know, it sounds drastic, but at that point, I didn't care. I just needed answers. The detective I found was discreet and professional. He started trailing Lisa, checking into her whereabouts, and soon, he was able to report back with something I wasn't expecting. Trevor wasn't just some guy from her past. He had a much darker connection to her life than I could have ever imagined. According to the detective, Trevor worked in paranormal research, the kind of research that most people would never even think about. He wasn't just studying ghosts or spirits. He was studying the human mind, pushing the boundaries of psychological influence, manipulating thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. He had been conducting experiments in various locations, one of which was the very house I was living in with Lisa. The detective also uncovered something even more disturbing. Trevor's experiments weren't just theoretical. He had worked in that house before Lisa and I had moved in, and he had used psychological techniques to influence the previous owners. The most chilling part? The previous owners had vanished without a trace. The detective didn't have all the details yet, but the idea of Trevor's experiments on people, on manipulating their very minds, made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't help but feel like the house, our house, had somehow become a vessel for something dark, a place where Trevor had planted his influence, where the line between reality and manipulation was blurred. As I sat there, processing this new information, I realized just how far I had fallen into this strange, twisted web. Lisa hadn't just been cheating on me, not in the way I had thought. She had been caught in something much more sinister, something beyond her control. The more I thought about it, the more it all started to make sense. Her strange behavior, her distant attitude, her obsession with Trevor, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was manipulation, the kind of manipulation that wasn't just emotional, but mental and psychological. And Trevor, it seemed, had been pulling the strings all along. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront Lisa. But before I did, I needed more answers. I needed to know exactly what Trevor had done in that house, how deep this all went. So, I started digging into his past, following every lead I could find. One evening, I took a trip to the park, the same park Lisa had spent time in with Trevor. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but I knew it was the right place to start. And sure enough, as I walked through the trees, I came across something I wasn't expecting: old, worn tapes hidden away in a small box under a bench. They were labeled with dates, and a few of them had Trevor's name scrawled on the cover. I felt a strange, cold sense of dread settle over me as I picked up the tapes. I knew these weren't just some forgotten relics of Trevor's past. They were pieces of the puzzle that could explain everything. I took the tapes back to my car, my hands trembling as I slid one into the player. The first recording was disturbing. It was Trevor's voice, calm and measured, guiding someone through a series of psychological tests. The subject on the tape, a woman, sounded disoriented, confused. As the tape continued, it became clear that Trevor wasn't just conducting experiments on them. He was manipulating them, breaking them down, molding their minds like clay. The more I listened, the more I realized that what Trevor was doing in those experiments wasn't just about research. It was about control, and it was all connected to Lisa. That was when I understood. Trevor hadn't just been Lisa's friend. He had been using her, twisting her mind through the very house we lived in, through the very air we breathed. This wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was a story about control, about turning someone into a puppet. And now, as I sat there in my car, listening to those recordings, I knew there was only one thing left to do. I had to confront Lisa. I had to face the truth. But the truth was darker and more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking through a fog, one where nothing seemed real anymore. I had heard the recordings, and every word Trevor had spoken echoed in my mind like a distant drumbeat. The unsettling realization that Trevor had been manipulating Lisa, influencing her mind through the house we called home, was enough to make my blood run cold. But there was still so much I didn't know. The pieces didn't quite fit together yet. I had to confront Lisa. I had to face her, ask her directly what Trevor had done to her, how long this had been going on, and why. When she returned home that evening, there was something different in the way she looked at me. It wasn't just the usual distance I had been feeling lately. There was something deeper, something that made my stomach twist. She was acting like she was trying to hide something, but what? What had she been hiding from me all this time? I couldn't stand it any longer. I needed to know. I waited until later that night, when she went to bed, before I started going through her things. I felt a mixture of guilt and necessity. But as I rifled through her drawers, her bags, searching for anything that could give me more answers, my heart began to race. Then, I found it. Another note. It wasn't like the one she had written before. It wasn't a reminder of something we had planned or something mundane. This note felt different. It felt wrong. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it in my hand, and read the words scrawled in Lisa's handwriting. You can't run away from whoever is behind you. You can't see him, but he's here. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I just stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. Who was behind her? Who was she talking about? The first thing that came to my mind was Trevor, but this felt different. This note was too cryptic, too ominous. It didn't sound like Lisa. Her writing had always been neat, but this was chaotic, the words barely legible, as if they had been written in a hurry. My mind raced as I tried to understand the meaning behind it, but there was nothing I could do to make it clearer. I had to find out more. This wasn't just a note written by a confused mind. This felt like a warning, a message. I needed to confront Lisa, but something stopped me. Something told me I wasn't ready. Maybe I was afraid of what I would find out. Or maybe it was the overwhelming sense that the truth was darker than I could imagine. As I sat there, staring at the note, the darkness in the room felt thicker, more suffocating. I couldn't explain it, but the air seemed to press in on me, like the house itself was alive with some unseen presence. I walked down the hall, my feet heavy, and I made my way to her bedroom. I couldn't bring myself to wake her, not yet. The thought of facing her with the note in my hand made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't control. I sat down at the edge of the bed, staring at the note, feeling my pulse quicken. It was as if the walls of the house were closing in on me, and I was trapped, alone with the fear of what was coming. What had Trevor done to her? How far had this manipulation gone? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about a betrayal. This was something much darker, something I couldn't explain. The more I tried to reason with myself, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and dread. I couldn't let it go. I had to know what Lisa was involved in, what Trevor had done to her. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Every time I saw her, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. There was a part of her that was still my wife, the woman I loved, but there was also something else. Something cold, something controlled. And it wasn't just her. It was the house too. I could feel it in the air, in the way the shadows seemed to stretch a little too far, the way the silence felt too thick. The house wasn't just a place anymore. It felt like a prison, a vessel for something darker than I could understand. I decided to hire the detective again. I needed more answers. But when I called him, he told me something that made my blood run cold. Trevor hadn't just been experimenting on Lisa in subtle ways. He had been using the house itself as a tool to break her down, to control her. The house had become the perfect setting for Trevor's experiments. He had planted something here, something deep in the structure, in the very walls of the house. There were whispers, rumors, that the house itself had a history of driving people to madness. And that was when I realized the truth. This wasn't just a matter of a man manipulating a woman. This house, and everything in it, was part of something much bigger, something that went far beyond what I had ever thought possible. The note was just the beginning. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I knew now that the house wasn't just a backdrop to our lives. It was the heart of this darkness, and Trevor was its master. And Lisa. Lisa was no longer just my wife. She had become part of something else, part of Trevor's twisted control. I had no idea how deep this twisted rabbit hole really went until the day I ventured into the basement. There had always been something off about that part of the house. The air down there was heavier, colder, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I never spent much time down there, just the occasional trip to grab some old holiday decorations or boxes of things we didn't need. But something changed after I heard the detective's report. Something clicked inside me, and the pull to investigate the basement became unbearable. I knew there was something down there I had to see. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew the basement held answers. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands shaking as I descended the creaky stairs, the wooden steps groaning under my weight. The air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and something darker, something almost metallic. The basement was eerily silent, but I felt the weight of its presence. It was like the walls themselves were whispering, murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. I swept the beam of light across the concrete floor, and that's when I saw it, the same note I had found earlier. It was pinned to the wall, the paper yellowed with age, but the words still clear. I'm not your Lisa anymore. Trevor rules here. I froze. My heart stopped. This time, it wasn't just a note. It was a declaration, a final, terrifying statement. Lisa had written it again, but this time, it wasn't just about something personal between us. It was as if she was lost, trapped somewhere beyond herself. The first time I found a note like this, I thought maybe it was a cry for help, a sign of some kind of mental break. But this was different. This wasn't just Lisa's handwriting. It was something darker, something twisted, something that had been imprinted on her. I walked closer, my eyes scanning the walls of the basement, looking for anything out of place. The shadows danced unnaturally in the corners, and the faintest breeze seemed to circulate, though there were no open windows. As I moved further in, I noticed something that sent a wave of dread through me. The walls were covered with symbols, strange, intricate markings I didn't recognize. They weren't just random scribbles or graffiti. These symbols had purpose. They were deliberate, and they seemed to pulse with an energy I could almost feel. There was a chill in the air now, not from the temperature, but from something darker, something ancient that had seeped into the very fabric of the house. I felt sick as I realized that these symbols weren't just decorations. They were part of Trevor's influence, part of the ritual he had conducted here. This basement, this house, it was a vessel for something much older than us, something that had been awakened by Trevor's experiments. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but at the same time, I knew I had no choice but to face it. Lisa hadn't just been manipulated by Trevor. She had been changed, reshaped by something far beyond my understanding. The symbols, the note, the strange energy in the house, it was all part of a plan. A plan that I had never even begun to comprehend. As I stood there, my flashlight illuminating the terrifying symbols on the walls, a thought struck me. Trevor had been using psychological manipulation to control Lisa, yes, but there was more to it than that. He had used the house, its history, its dark energy, as a tool to break her down. This wasn't just mind control. It was something more insidious, something that reached into the very essence of who Lisa was and twisted it. Trevor had found a way to not only manipulate her thoughts, but to control her very identity. He had taken her away from me, but in doing so, he had also taken her away from herself. And what I was seeing in that basement was the physical manifestation of that control. I felt a shiver run down my spine as the realization hit me. Lisa wasn't just under Trevor's influence. She was a puppet, and Trevor had severed the strings that bound her to reality. The woman I had loved, the woman I had married, was no longer the same. She had been consumed by whatever dark forces Trevor had unleashed. I wanted to believe that she was still in there somewhere, still fighting for control, but standing in that basement, surrounded by those symbols, I knew deep down that she was lost. I had been blind to the extent of Trevor's hold on her, but now, I saw it clearly. It was then that I heard the sound, a soft, almost imperceptible creak, like the floorboards shifting. My heart jumped into my throat as I turned toward the stairs. I wasn't alone. I wasn't sure who it was at first, but then I saw her, Lisa, standing at the top of the stairs. She didn't speak, just stared at me with hollow eyes. Her face was a mask, and I could see now how much she had changed. There was a coldness in her eyes that wasn't there before. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was part of something else, something far darker than I could understand. Andrew, she whispered, her voice sounding distant, like it was coming from somewhere far away. You shouldn't have come down here. It's too late. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. The fear that gripped me was overwhelming. I wanted to run, to escape, but something in her gaze stopped me. She wasn't the same person. I could see it now. I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at something else, something that had taken her away from me, something that had taken her away from herself. And as I stood there, trapped in that basement, the weight of everything I had discovered crashing down on me, I understood. There was no escaping Trevor, not anymore. Not for Lisa, not for me. The darkness had already claimed us. The truth hit me like a wave, drowning me in its weight. Lisa wasn't just manipulated by Trevor. She wasn't merely someone caught in the web of psychological influence or an innocent victim of dark rituals. No, she had been completely consumed, reshaped into something else entirely, something Trevor controlled. I didn't know how much of the woman I loved was still there, if anything at all. The realization gnawed at me like a festering wound. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. The person standing at the top of the stairs, staring down at me with those empty eyes, was no longer Lisa. She had become something darker, something I didn't recognize. It wasn't just her mind Trevor had corrupted, it was her very soul. Her voice echoed through the silence, hollow and distant, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. "You shouldn't have come down here, Andrew. It's too late." Her words sent a shiver through me. She wasn't even speaking to me like a wife. She spoke like a stranger, someone who had already been lost to the abyss. I wanted to reach out to her, to pull her back, but I couldn't find the words. There was no point in pleading anymore. The woman I once knew was gone. Whatever Trevor had done to her, it had erased her, left only a shadow behind. And standing there, surrounded by the dark symbols and the oppressive weight of the basement, I realized that I was staring at something I couldn't fix, something I couldn't save. I slowly made my way up the stairs, feeling the tremor in my hands. Every step felt like it took me further away from my own reality, further into the nightmare Trevor had created. As I reached the top of the stairs, I found myself face to face with Lisa, or what was left of her. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there in the hallway, her eyes fixed on me with a mixture of sadness and something colder. She wasn't alone. I could feel the presence of someone else, something else, in the house. Trevor's influence was everywhere, like a dark cloud that had descended upon us, suffocating everything in its path. I turned toward the living room, and there he was, Trevor. He stood in the doorway, his eyes gleaming with a sickening sense of satisfaction. He didn't have to say anything. His mere presence told me everything I needed to know. He had won. He had completely taken control, not just of Lisa, but of everything I thought I knew. He was the puppet master, the dark force pulling all the strings, and now, it seemed, he had the final victory. "This house, Andrew," Trevor said, his voice smooth, almost comforting. "It was never just about you and Lisa. This was always bigger than your little life together. This house, this place, it's a doorway, a vessel. And now, you and Lisa are mine. All of you." His words felt like a slap in the face. The horror of what he was saying didn't fully sink in at first. I couldn't comprehend it, not completely. But as I looked at Lisa, her eyes vacant and hollow, I knew it was true. Trevor had turned our lives into a game, a dark ritual that had consumed everything. Lisa wasn't just a victim of some affair or mind games. She had been chosen. She had been manipulated into becoming a tool for something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. Trevor stepped forward, his gaze never leaving me. "You still think you can save her, don't you?" he asked, almost mockingly. "But you never stood a chance, Andrew. This isn't about love. It's about control. And now, your wife belongs to me. She's a part of the force I've created, a force that has already claimed you two. You just don't know it yet." I felt a sickening pang in my chest. His words were true. Lisa was no longer mine. And this house, this cursed place, wasn't just a home. It was a prison, a vessel for something dark, something ancient that had taken hold of everything I had ever cared about. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to do anything to break the hold Trevor had over us. But I knew, deep down, there was nothing I could do. The power he wielded was too strong. The darkness that had seeped into Lisa, into me, into this house, was inescapable. "You never understood, did you?" Trevor continued, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "Lisa's not just a victim. She was always a part of this. She's the key, Andrew. She was meant to be a conduit, a vessel for the darkness I've unleashed. She was always going to be mine. And now, you're a part of it too." I felt a surge of rage, a final desperate attempt to break free from the suffocating hold Trevor had on me. But even as I clenched my fists, ready to fight for my wife, I knew it was over. Lisa was gone. She had already become part of something bigger, something beyond my comprehension. The woman I had loved was lost, consumed by forces she couldn't even understand. And me? I was already trapped, caught in Trevor's web, a pawn in his twisted game. Lisa didn't say a word. She just stood there, a shadow of her former self, her eyes empty. And I knew then that there was no coming back. She was gone, and I was never going to be able to bring her back. Not from Trevor, not from whatever darkness had taken her. I left that night. I couldn't stay in that house anymore, surrounded by the remnants of a life I had once known. I packed my things, left everything behind, and fled. I don't know where I went after that, just somewhere far away. Somewhere that wasn't the place where Trevor had won, where Lisa had been lost. But even now, sometimes, when I lie awake at night, I hear her voice. A whisper in the back of my mind, calling to me from the shadows. You didn't free me. And it haunts me, every day. Because deep down, I know she's still there. Trapped. And I'm the one who failed to save her.